Hey everyone, welcome back! Today's build covers an unkillable SPEEDVA Nuke setup. You heard that right. SPEEDVA Nuke. While there are a million things going on in the background for today's build, the actual playstyle is quite simple. You cast Null Stars at the start of the mission, and theoretically, unless you fall off, never have to cast it again. Have Xata's Whispers up, which lasts 88 seconds on this build, and cast your 4 whenever it stops expanding, which is roughly every 15 seconds, hardly different from normal hack and slash Nova gameplay, right? So what exactly makes this build nuke so hard, and what makes it so unkillable? Let's take a closer look. Yesterday, Topaz Archon Shards were adjusted to not give shields back when your shields are currently empty. AKA they couldn't bypass shield recharge delay by themselves to give you infinite shield gain. I still use one blast Topaz shard on today's build, but it is optional rather than mandatory, as it gives an extra layer of survivability. Today's build includes armor strip, quadratic scaling DPS with cubic dipping on Banes, blast proc spam for Topaz shards, constant tile-wide crowd control, all the while speeding enemies up to their deaths. The reason why this build works so well is it is nearly completely prevents enemies from being able to hit you, all the while bringing them towards you as fast as possible. So let's take a look at each kit element. Molecular Prime is the most important part of this loadout for multiple reasons. 1. It doubles your damage against enemies, except Overguard, and is basically the equivalent of a free viral proc, and it continues to expand and linger after cast, meaning you do not have to spam it. Our damage comes entirely from weapons today, and not this ability, allowing us to run a negative strength build. 10% strength makes enemies run towards us 60% faster. Since our strength is our dump stat, we're able to build sky-high duration, which both makes buffs easier to manage like Xata, but also significantly increases the hitbox of Molecular Prime, since it continues to expand around through walls for 15 seconds on this build, reaching a maximum coverage of 80 meters radius. Molecular Prime also serves another purpose. It taxis the traits of the weapon used to land the kill. If I kill a Molec primed enemy with an Incarnon gun, the explosion inherits the trait of my Incarnon weapon. This was how we made Nova inherit almost a year ago, making the explosion deal 440 times the intended damage with Fenimore or Latum. But today, we use it very differently. If we kill with a Dagger, then the Molecular Prime explosion is considered a Dagger damage, and inherits Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger to strip armor. We're also using Melee Influence, which can also inherit Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger to strip armor in a 20 meter AoE. Therefore, every single time we proc Electric or another dot element with our Dagger, enemies get stripped within a 20 meter of us. Every single time an enemy dies, every enemy within 20 meters also eats an armor strip when they explode, since we naturally built for range, as a 10% strength Nova requires overextended anyways. Why did I use Xata's Whisper? Every time I swing my Dagger, an extra hit is created and also armor strip, since it also procs Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger. Xata's Void Bubble also minimizes the amount of incoming firepower, because Molecular Prime also inherits the Void Bubble on explosion, scaling with our melee status chance, and basically guarantees everything is bubbled at all times and unable to shoot us due to bullet attractors. The final consequence: enemies rush towards us, but are unable to damage us, and group themselves together to be killed to maximize kills per minute. Beautiful, isn't it? Survivability comes in 4 different ways today. We have Molecular Fission, which both grants us refreshable 75% damage reduction to health from 15 particles, since we have no problems upkeeping kills through Molecular Prime, as well as higher range making particles seek out and stun enemies. We have Xata's Whisper, making Molecular Prime spread massive void bubbles to prevent enemies from shooting us. We have Adaptation to reduce incoming damage to our shields and health. We are also using Rakta Dark Dagger, which restores shields based off of damage dealt to enemies with radiation procs active on them. More importantly, because Melee Influence spreads all status effects of my melee within 20 meters, Rakta is now able to inflict radiation in a 20 meter radius and the shield leech from all enemies at once, at all times. This massively multiplies the amount of shield leech available, restoring all shields in a single swing. This build is still doable with any Dagger instead of Rakta, but survivability may or may not be noticeably impacted, which can be band-aided by our 5th optional survivability tool. Everything on this build today deals Blast, our Molecular Prime explosions, our Sentinel with a Verglas beam, and optionally, even your Dagger. If you're using Rakta, I would recommend modding Viral Electric or Gas Electric and leaving the innate radiation there. If you're not using Rakta, I would recommend modding Blast Electric to take advantage of shield regeneration from Topaz Shards when you inflict Blast. This should be easy to upkeep since any dagger can spread statuses in a 20-meter radius with melee influence, all the while we keep dragging enemies towards us with Nautilus Cordon and SPEEDVA. Finally, if SPEEDVA wasn't enough to speed kills alone, think of this. Enemies rush towards us because of Molecular Prime, but once they're within 20 meters of us, if you're using Rakta, which has innate radiation, you will crowd control enemies due to melee influence and make them shoot each other instead of rushing to us. Or just any dagger in general might be spreading electric procs which stuns them. This can be fixed with Nautilus Cordon since it pulls enemies within 30 meters of us, which is greater than the crowd control radius of melee's influence's procs. This is somewhat less important on an ordinary dagger modded with Blast Electric. Manifold Bond would be super easy to activate because Rakta will spread radiation, viral, and electric, whereas normal daggers can mod Blast and Electric and also equip Whispers in the Wall's radiation mod Focus Raiden, which of course will spread within 20 meters via melee influence. Okay, let's look at those builds. Our Nova today has a single optional Blast Topaz Shard. This is mostly unnecessary for Rakta Dark Dagger setups, and is more so a failsafe for other daggers. You may want to consider using 2 casting speed shards for Molecular Prime, unless you're okay with hopping in and out of Operator every 20 seconds to activate Matter Eye's Power Transfer plus 50% casting speed buff. Our aura is of course power donation, since we want to bottom out our strength as much as possible, and Prime Sure-Footed helps so you don't get knocked around, but also isn't as absolutely mandatory since Molecular Prime cannot stagger you and our main DPS comes from melee hack and slash spam. We want super high duration so that Molecular Prime spreads as easily as possible, reaching 80 meters out on the setup. This also makes Xata's Whisper low maintenance at 88 seconds duration. If you want movement bonus, I kept her portal on, and with a 199 range build, this guarantees 100 meters of travel, but more importantly, it makes Molecular Prime have a 20 meter blast radius. This is fantastic for ensuring other enemies are caught within the blast radius of death, since Molecular Prime does tax the Amalgam Argonak Metal Auger for an extra armor strip hit. With enemies dropping like flies, the constant explosions will result in a lot of extra armor strip, all the while dragging enemies in with Cordon. The range also gives slight bonus crowd control to the seek radius of our null stars, but that isn't really that important. In theory, null stars are optional and only really matter if you start taking health damage. This shouldn't be an issue since enemies are rad procced, void bubble procced, electro stunned, and being dragged around by Cordon within 20 meters of you. Molecular Fission is only really here to prevent health one-shots combined with adaptation. Otherwise, you should be sitting on 1570 overshields at nearly all times, with shields constantly regenerating from Molecular Prime Blast DPS, and your Sentinels blast Verglas beam damage on anything close to you. We even have one Auger mod here with 2 more on my pistol that I'll explain later. Arcane Strike is highly recommended, since I'm not using any attack speed mods on my dagger. Energize helps unless you want to slot Equilibrium on the build somewhere. You have enough energy even at start to cast your 1, 2, and 4 when you load in, letting you begin your first rotation immediately. Argonak is a standard build with its Metal Auger augment, which can strip armor off not just direct hits, but any dagger damage, including dots and when damaged dagger is inherited, including Molecular Prime explosions and melee influence AoE. Amalgam Serration for extra sprint speed on a hack and slash build, and Dexterity Arcanes for combo duration. Our pistol can be whatever you want, I just recommend bringing Dexterity Arcanes for combo duration again and 2 Auger mods, so that when you cast your Molecular Prime, you can shield gate with it to restore 120 shields. This can be very handy for when your shields break once in a blue moon, as Topaz Shards cannot restore shields when they're empty. So this will jumpstart them, with your Sentinel immediately attacking something with its blast modded Verglas beam to proc Topaz Shards and skyrocket your shields instantly. Our Rakta build looks like this. I've opted for Viral Electric today to boost electric procs by 4.25 times damage, combined with Molecular Prime's separate 2 times total damage multiplier for 8.5 higher damage on the electric chains. While I could go Gas Electric, I felt it was unnecessary since the strip was already more than fast enough. Feel free to try Gas or Viral Electric here, and due to high status chance and high attack speed of Dagger archetypes, as well as free grouping from Nautilus, I would keep Viral or Gas unranked since they're capped at 10 stacks on enemies. The only benefit of Gas here is leaving lingering armor strip clouds after enemies die, whereas Electric disappears on death. Berserker Fury is an obvious candidate due to constant full strip and easy AoE melee kills. Primed Smite is extremely important because it double dips our Dagger, Electric, and Gas dots for 2.4 times more damage, but triple dips these procs on the spread from melee influence for 3.7 times more damage. Condition Overload is self-explanatory with all the status spread, and Prime Reach makes it easier for us to hit crowds, since daggers have a much smaller base range than most melee. Weeping Wounds bumps us up to 171% status chance at 12 times combo, which is comfy. This time, I brought Discipline's Merit specifically for Acolytes, so you can go up and whack them with a free heavy Tennokai to nuke them from orbit, and that's its only purpose here. Of course, melee influence, since that's our main way of AoE DPS and armor strip. Pointed Wind is best hack and slash multipliers, since we only need to hit a few targets due to melee influence AoE. Your focus school is free, and if you don't have spare casting speed shards, you can take Matarai for transference buff. Just going in and out of Operator will grant you a plus 50% casting speed buff from power transfer for 20 seconds. Companion is obviously Nautilus. This gets over the 20 meters AoE crowd control issue of electric and radiation procs that I mentioned earlier that otherwise prevents enemies from getting closer to you. Remember to actually slot assault mode, as that was my accident from a recent video that I didn't mention where I had reinforced spawn here instead. Our weapon today is Verglas, a beam weapon modded for blast so it can proc the Topaz shard as often as possible. If you aren't using a blast shard, you can use whatever weapon you want here. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible. Like I've done with the Whispers in the Wall updates. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.